the F-22 Raptor, or as I like to call it, the American J-20, or as I also like to call it, the YF-23, but worse. Join me as I slog through Revell's utterly baffling rendition of America's premier balloon popper. As with all bad kits, this one started with hunting for and filling poorly placed ejector pin marks, but I don't tend to record those sorts of things, so here's the cockpit instead. It's relatively standard stuff. You put the ejection seat together, paint some things FS36231 and other things black. The ejection seat is actually pretty damn good for out of the box 72nd scale, much less Revell. It's a bit like the 1/12th scale one I made a while back, but a sixth of the size and with less parts. The cockpit tub and instrument panel are decals, so boo, cringe, I hate it, but at the very least, the decals are actually the correct size and generally blend in with everything else. Now that I've run out of things to say about the cockpit, it's time to ramble about the quality of the injection moulding. This kit is borderline incompetent in this regard. It's got plenty of flash, which isn't really an issue unless you somehow forget to remove it, but it's also just never a good look either. This kit dates back to 2008, so I can only assume that this is the global financial crisis's fault somehow, and the fact that I've had Hasegawa kits from 1988 with virtually no flash is due to the bubble economy. There's also plenty of really terribly placed ejector pin marks in places that will either make you wonder why they oriented parts on the sprue like that, or make you want to cry. Air intakes, doors, the side weapons bays, plenty of annoying circles to keep you occupied, if not entertained, for hours and hours on end. I mean, look at this! This may be a bit of a hot take, as the children nowadays stopped saying several years ago, but I'd almost prefer having them on the outer surfaces of the doors, because guess what? Those need filling and sanding too. They had the worst, most abysmal dogshit sink marks. It almost looked like distressed skin texture, but a layer of putty and inhaling a decade's worth of microplastics is enough to fix that too. While I'm being controversial, I'd also prefer the side weapons base to be built up with the 5 walls separate, if it means that I don't have to try fit sandpaper inside of an area less than a square centimeter, but I digress. After the cockpit, you put various bits on the bottom half of the fuselage. The instructions would have you put the landing gears on alongside the main weapons bay, but after some testing, I determined that you can finagle them in after the fact, which will make painting a lot easier. The main landing gear bay also fits alright. It matches the overall profile of the bottom half of the fuselage well enough, which I don't know why I'm congratulating, honestly. The fit of the weapons bay is also sufficient, not much to say about them. The air intakes though are another story. For some reason, someone at Revell decided that the top of the main weapons bay should be the bottom of the air intakes, and the bottom of the air intakes should interface into the fuselage with a notch, so there's like 5 different seams going on down there, and also, the bottom of the air intakes just doesn't fit with the fuselage, and leaves a big gap in step which needed yet more filling and sanding to fix. And, to top it all off, the locating pins on the air intake parts are too big, and actually intrude into the air intakes themselves, and are plenty visible if you look down them. I'd also probably recommend installing the air intakes into the blanking plate first, before installing everything else onto the fuselage, because doing it the other way will probably be a bit messy after you clamp everything down. After that, and the tailpipe section, which I didn't record because of how unnoteworthy it is, the 2 fuselage halves could be mated together. They give you the option to keep the ailerons positionable if you want to have them break off as you handle the model, but otherwise this too is standard. The 2 fuselage halves generally fit together quite well, with the exception of the bits near the air intakes, but the locating features are actually properly aligned, which is a bit of a rarity. So long as you clamp everything down enough and hold everything in place properly, there's only a bit of fairly basic filling and sanding to be done. Also, as an aside, the detail in this kit is quite basic in areas and borderline non-existent in others. You may or may not have noticed my prior attempt at scratch building in the weapons bays using scrap wire, depending on what footage I decided to use, but ultimately I went with stretch sprue because it's a bit easier to work with. Admittedly, the main weapons bay does get hidden by the main weapons, and my work is massively oversimplified compared to the real thing, but it does in fact get the job done. I also gave the wheel wells the same treatment with some stretch sprue, which is probably a bit more important due to how visible those are, even with the titular main landing gears. There's also a few basic panel lines you can scribe in, and some rivets to add, which I pinched from some photos of the Academy Kit sprues, as well as some photos of actual Raptors, which are easy enough to add. But what really gets my goat, as the kids say, is the fact that this kit is completely devoid of any scribed lines for the radome. The uninitiated among you may think that the zigzags on top of the fuselage are the radome and that they forgot to add any lines on the bottom, which would itself be baffling. But if you compare the plastic to a side view of an actual Raptor, you'll notice that while these two panels are on the actual plane, albeit a bit simplified to match up with another panel line, the actual radar is quite a ways away from these two panels, i.e. there is no radome on the kit plastic. There is only one review on the internet that mentions this, which would be Jim Rottramel's 2008 article, which is a build-up of a test shot of this kit, but has literally all of the same issues as the retail kit. This article was invaluable for finding and correcting all the other flaws previously mentioned or otherwise, and it even comes with some helpful templates for a bunch of things including but not limited to the radome. While I slightly screwed up the cutting and alignment, actually scribing the radome was about as straightforward as it can be when someone else has done all the hard work for you. But you gotta understand, this fucking sucks. This isn't something that I, or any other poor sucker who bought this kit, should have to do in the first place. I genuinely do not understand how this made it past the first draft, much less an actual production kit that actually costs actual money. Anyways, priming. Okay, that's enough of that. While waiting for everything to properly cure, I worked on the things under wings, or I suppose things inside of the fuselage in this case. You get a good selection of what the F-22 carries, including AIM-9LNXs, AIM-120s, and GBU-32s. There's also drop tanks if you're that way inclined, but that sort of defeats the purpose of a sleek stealth fighter, doesn't it? Everything's moulded well enough, with the exception of the mounting holes on the AIM-9Xs being on the wrong side, but otherwise no major issues. Everything also has decals, which I do really like, although this does have the unfortunate side effect of requiring you to apply around 58 decals if you decide not to use the JDAMs, but it's so worth it honestly. Also, because I won't have anywhere else to mention this ever, while the 2021 boxing of this kit that I'm building has normal correct markings guides for everything, the original 2008 boxing's markings guides for the weapons are a bit, shall we say, creative. Let's take a look. Before putting the landing gears on, I first had to paint various things white, every scale modeler's favourite step. Historically, I've just used Vallejo's white grey, because it's wide enough and covers just okay compared to their pure white, which covers incredibly poorly. A while back, I saw a review of this here Army Painter matte white paint, which claimed to be the best covering white paint out there. It covers like medium sea grey, it said. Well, my so-called local hobby shop recently started stocking Army Painter, so I figured I'd buy a bottle and see how it does. The results were just okay. It still took about 5 or 6 coats to get anything resembling full coverage, although it is significantly wider than white grey. No kidding. Although I think that's arguably a bit of a drawback, because in my opinion, there are very few cases where using pure black or pure white on a model doesn't look incredibly stark and weird. Granted, I ended up just doing that in the landing gear and weapons bays, although it's okay when I do it, because I'm a hypocrite. After enduring that, I then put the landing gears on. I don't know why I thought using Revell contactor on painted and primed plastic was a good idea, but if you decide to do them this way, probably don't do that. Again, it is possible to get the landing gears in after assembling everything else, although it's not the easiest thing one could do. It's almost as if they weren't designed to go on that way or something. But never mind the faff, here's painting. People will swear up and down that nobody actually knows what colours Raptors are painted, or give wildly inaccurate suggestions, but really, we've known this since about 2004. See, look, here's a guy who emailed Lockheed. Here's the official F-22 website, circa 2004. It's FS36173 and FS36251. The same grey is used on the post-1991 Mod Eagle scheme for a plane whose name escapes me currently. The primary sources neglect to mention that the lightest grey, outlining the edges of the wings and stabilizers, is FS36375 Light Ghost Grey. Fortunately, the instructions correctly call this out, and if you were to go strictly by these paint codes, you get a model that looks okay but isn't quite right. Because you see, the F-22 utilizes a top coat that either reduces the Raptor's vulnerability to infrared threats if you believe this Boeing press release from 2000, or radar cross-section if you believe literally any other source. This top coat potentially maybe possibly has iron mixed into it in some fashion, which in turn makes the plane all shiny-like. There are many ways to replicate this, most of which aren't very convincing. The way I went about it was no exception. Basically, I just opted to do the same thing as my J20 from a while back, where I first painted and then masked off light ghost grey areas, before subsequently painting the main colour. I used a 1-to-1 mix of FS36251 and aluminum on the lighter grey. Although for reasons we'll get into later, you may want to add a slight amount of gunmetal to the mix, as this ended up slightly too light in my opinion. The darker grey was an indeterminate mix of FS36176, aluminum and gunmetal. It started off as 2-to-1-to-1, but then I added a bit more grey to darken it and then a bit more gunmetal to keep up the sheen. Painting was fairly straightforward, although it is worth mentioning that the instructions don't really make any attempt to tell you how thick the light ghost grey areas should be, so I ended up going with the Academy Kit's instructions guides of 4.2mm on the fuselage and 3.5mm on the vertical stabilizers. After unmasking everything before to put the decals on, it admittedly did look a bit strange. The metallic effect was of course very pronounced, but this would eventually be fixed. However, this did make the light ghost grey strips just look wrong. As I mentioned, I think this is because the main colour is just a hair too light. I'm convinced that it's not that AK 3rd Gen's match of light ghost grey is too blue, because the FS36375 really does have a noticeable blue cast to it, which you can see in whatever photos I've decided to put up here. Slight sidebar, but on the topic of AK 3rd Gen, their Mod Eagle paint matches are absurdly dark, but that'll come up again some other time in the distant future probably. Regardless, it's incredibly difficult to fully nail down the F-22's finish, so just have fun and be yourself. After all that was done, I moved on to the decals. This kit comes with two schemes in the box. First, and the one I went with, is 03055 of the 199th Fighter Squadron based at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam in Hawaii, circa 2010 according to the instructions. I think this scheme isn't entirely correct however, as F16.net's database alleges that this plane was transferred to the 199th Squadron in 2011, which is splitting hairs. What isn't splitting hairs however, is the decal on the port nose gear bay door bearing the name of Senator Daniel Inouye, which is accurate for an F-22, just not this one, as it was actually 03045 that was dedicated to Inouye during the Raptor's arrival ceremony in Hawaii back in 2010. I haven't seen any evidence that this decal is on 055. I put it on my models because I didn't find out until way later. I sure hope someone got 5 that blunder. The second is 01022, belonging to the 43rd Fighter Squadron based in Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, circa 2015 according to the instructions. This plane's main claim to fame is that it lost control and crashed on the 15th of May 2020. The pilot ejected safely, but there's a nice vaguely morbid subject if you're into that. The decals themselves are alright, although some of them such as the stars and bars are the tiniest bit out of register. They're released quickly, go on fine, and actually feel like they were designed for the kit they're included in. I also like how a lot of the decals for the various meshes are slightly transparent, which makes them look like actual meshes. While I am a firm believer in doing meshes in plastic or photo etch, that is indeed an acceptable compromise in my opinion. With the decals done, the only major step left was to fuck around with oil paints. I first did a wash using Payne's Grey and Burnt Umber. I didn't record it, but I trust we all know what a panel line wash looks like at this point. Then, I decided to break up the general monolithicness of the great big flat surfaces by first brushing on a light layer of odorless terps onto the model, and then dotting on small dots of white and buff oil paints. Then, with a brush very lightly dampened in odorless terps, I stippled the dots to blend them in and make it look all a tad random. I did the same with a thin mix of black and burnt umber, because where there's highlights there must be shadows. While this sort of microtonal variation, as we in the biz call it, isn't really the most accurate effect ever, the dark oil paints had the added benefit of acting more like a filter to give the metallic sheen a more accurate, warmer, more reddish brown hue, so it all works out. Finally, all that's left is to put all the vertical stabilizers, doors and missiles in their place. And as if to say one last fuck you, the fit of the Sidewinder pylons is so vague that it barely even counts as a concept anymore. The weapons bay's doors, both main and side, are also somewhat questionable, but are fairly straightforward to figure out. Everything else is just okay, and with that I can finally call my build of Revell's F-22 done. Now, given all the things I've said about this kit over the past however many minutes it's been, you'd surely expect another company to have made a better kit of the Raptor in their only scale ever. You would be correct, but this being scale modelling, the reality is a lot more depressing and stupid than one would expect. From what I can tell, the absolute best 10 out of 10 sex tier F-22 money can buy would be the Fujimi kit, sporting some tasteful raised detail for the ram tape and some batshit insane features for a modern kit, such as a hinged canopy, movable control surfaces, and fully modelled removable engines. The main issue is that it was released once in 2010 and seemingly never again. And there are so few builds and reviews of it online that you'd think it never just came out in the first place. Well, the Academy one's pretty pricey, so surely that's going to be appreciably better than this one, right? You're very funny, please quit your day job and become a comedian. While Academy's one does indeed have nicer surface detail, with rivets and weapons bay and landing gear bay wiring and, you know, the radome, that's more or less the only thing it has going for it over the Revell kit as far as I can tell. It shares a lot of the same general design philosophy as this kit, and all the issues that entails, including the weird air intake fit, which granted I think is an issue with every F-22 kit no matter the scale, ejector pin marks in stupid places, and also supposedly taking a step back in terms of shape accuracy, as the gap between the air intake splitter and the fuselage may or may not be a bit too small. I bought this kit on Amazon for the princely sum of $33 back in 2024, which is honestly a somewhat reasonable price. You can't do that anymore of course, because we can't have nice things, but I've seen this kit for around $55, which is a lot less reasonable. Conversely, the Academy kit tends to be $70 minimum at the hobby shops, although you may be able to get it for a bit cheaper, closer to about $60, if you're willing to deal with a slightly dodgy Amazon seller, or AliExpress, or Wolfpack's rebox of it or something. This does beg the question, how much do you value your sanity at? If you're, say, European and can find the Revell kit for €4 or however much they cost over there, while the Academy kit is still leagues more expensive, then yeah, no shit, get the Revell kit, that's a great deal. But, if there's only like a $15 difference between them though, is having to scribe out the radome yourself worth saving less than the price of lunch? Are the sink marks on the weapons bay doors something you're willing to save like the price of a pack of decent paintbrushes on? And this goes both ways too. Both kits share issues, but neither kit has issues that you can't fix yourself. Is the marginally better surface detail, which you can fairly easily recreate on the Revell kit, worth spending the same amount of money as that one game in your Steam wishlist that you swear you'll buy but you never end up doing, even though you keep getting emails that it's on sale? Genuinely, if it weren't for the big, glaring, gaping issues that the Revell kit has, it would kinda be a no-brainer. Like the Gripen, it's a fairly decent base to add on to, but unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, so now you have to decide what you're willing to put up with.